Well, welcome to another Thinker Update, and I'm really glad to have some guests at our office today. We've got John Hann and Katie Deerdorf and Steve Law, my researcher and writing partner and filmmaking partner. And today we're going to talk about history. Oh, a really exciting subject, isn't it? I mean, you can hardly wait to talk about history, but I'm sure your friends probably don't go out for coffee and say, let's talk about history. But history often could be like what happened last week. They might do that, right?
Not necessarily. I think the most recent history we've been talking about is possibly the death of Prince and the history of his life and other news, but not necessarily the history of the Bible, which is unfortunate, actually.
Right. Is it because they don't think history is actually really relevant to them right now? Is that correct? Or
that could be, or I think, some people my age are just have their focus in different areas and different interests. It comes up in different places. It could be relevant. I think it just depends on the topic. But when you're talking about the Bible and the history of that alone, I guess it's not something that a lot of people my age necessarily think about.
Okay. How about you, John?
As long as it has some import on your life, on your experience, then you care about history. But it's deeper history and wider history, not usual.
As we've been working on patterns of evidence, and we're working on future projects now, we know that there's this sort of worldview tension going on. There's this idea that where do we come from? That's a historical question. Did we just sort of evolve into, what we are today, or was there a God that created it? And, the Bible is the source of one of these narratives that says, no, God created, it all began with God creating, and then he had this relationship with these people. So when we think about this, the background that you have, well, where in the world did you get the information about your faith? I mean, where did it come from?
I was taught Bible stories and kind of talked about it in the car with my parents. I grew up in a Christian family. But I didn't understand the gravity of the whole story of the Bible until I got to college. Before, church was very much a social thing primarily. I mean, we were taught the Bible, but I actually didn't understand how like Noah and Abraham, and I didn't understand the chronology of the Bible until my freshman year at Hillsdale when I took a religion course and laid out the history of it, and it was so impactful on my faith because to have it all fit together in a cohesive story, it just had never been given to me before until college.
I always think about history, Steve, as a story, and the question is this story a real story or is it a made-up story?
Because there's a lot of people who are saying that it's not right now, and I think that's having a huge impact on the church even, is all these critics who are coming out and saying there's no evidence for any of this, especially the early history in the Bible. And I think that's really affecting the faith in the Christian church.
Yeah. So we're going to take a look at a video now by a very well-known scholar, Dr. Walt Kaiser. And he's going to talk about the importance of the historical part of the Bible. Why is it important that it's historical? So let's take a look at this. Dr. Walter C. Kaiser, Jr. is an author and professor of Bible and archaeology. Formerly, he has been the president of Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, the academic dean and professor of Old Testament at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, as well as a professor at Wheaton College. Dr. Kaiser has written numerous books and commentaries on the Old Testament and was a key participant in the development of the Zondervan Archaeological Study Bible. He gave us his thoughts on the film and its subject, the Exodus.
That story about the Exodus is very, very foundational. Matter of fact, going back to 1946, as I read the scholars, they said this was, and they used the word, foundational for the whole history of Israel. But by 1975, they had switched. 125 times in the biblical text, it has the formula, I'm the Lord your God that brought you up out of the land of bondage, out of the house of Egypt. So God identifies himself as the God who gave the deliverance. This is an amazing thing, that here was a ragtag group of people that were uncollected and with no kind of organization whatsoever. But all of a sudden they take on the largest power that is an empire power, and they whip them. And they leave, just walk out of town. Unheard of. And God identifies himself, and that, along with the theme that God began earlier to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the promise. So the promise and the Exodus are the two foundational themes that start the whole plan of God and carry us through the whole history, not only of Israel, but the history of all of Western and Eastern civilization. It's important to know that the Exodus really happened because it is so basic to everything that's happening. We've used that word, I'm going to use it again. It's foundational. And if there is no Exodus, then we begin to wonder, how can we have the God who presents himself and who prides himself, saying over 125 times, I am the Lord your God that brought you up out of the land of Egypt. It just doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense at all. So, therefore, it shakes the foundations even of New Testament theology, because the two are built together and they actually come together. So I think that it is extremely foundational for everything that God is going to do. The significance of the Exodus story is that this is the God of the universe, who is all-powerful, all-knowing, all-wise, and God of gods, Lord of lords, King of kings. And here it puts us immediately in a path where we've got a show and tell, where it actually is demonstrated. He not only is God in theory, but he is God and Lord over all in reality. And that's what's demonstrated in the Exodus itself. You don't think he is? Then watch the plagues. Plague 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you still don't think so. Chase after them and try to catch up to them as they're going through the sea. And then you get down in the sea and the waters come crushing back. There's got to be a huge impact upon Egypt and upon Israel too as well, who stood on the other side. And so, whew, that was close.
Well, Dr. Walt Kaiser certainly has laid out reasons why it's important for the Bible to be a historical document. Steve, what did you think? I mean, obviously you've heard this before, but what did you think, what he had to say?
I was just impressed with hearing his logic of, yes, if this is the God who portrays himself as the one who brought you out of Egypt, if that never really happened, then what kind of God is this? The whole story falls apart if it didn't really happen.
At a lot of college campuses, they are telling the students that according to what they see, there is no evidence. Isn't that correct?
Right. I mean, from their perspective, it's understandable because in the time they're looking, the evidence looks very bad for the Exodus.
Yeah. And that's why, coming along and saying, well, wait a minute, let's look at this pattern and say, well, let's take the Bible for what it says and look anywhere. Because you can build on premises that are maybe faulty from years ago, but everybody builds upon it because it's very difficult to change that. And so, I mean, as a young person, I mean, obviously a lot of younger people today are not really thinking about this at all, right? It's not on their radar. But I know if you go off to college, there's an enormous criticism, and I think it's really having its impact on a lot of people because there's so many criticisms that the Bible, that these events didn't happen, that the archaeology, just shows that there wasn't any evidence that it happened, and it really shakes a lot of people.
Right. I mean, they're saying, the Israelites were never in Egypt. The walls of Jericho never fell down. Obviously these are stories that were invented to, make a national religion and so forth. So that's what people are hearing, and that has a big effect, I think.
Has it affected you at all when you hear negative things about the Bible or about your faith?
I'd say it's impacted me the most just thinking about my relationship with Christ, because that's, I guess, what I focus on the most in my faith, is my one-on-one relationship with Jesus. And so just thinking about the history at all, to question that or to think that the Exodus never happened, it shakes my relationship with that, or at least it gets me thinking about it. Because if I, can't believe that the Exodus happened, that the history is real, then it totally changes my perspective of who my God is and what that means for me on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, going off to college, there are any number of things that can erode away at a faith if the faith is not built on something that is verifiable and true. And so this is one of them. So if you don't understand the reasons why the Exodus story is factually true, there's evidence for it, all someone has to do is come and pull that card out, and it's like a house of cards, and it starts to crumble, and then it becomes easier for you to question other things with your faith. So understanding the actual history and that there is evidence for it is really important.
Well, I think that that really sums it up. I think that's what Dr. Walt Kaiser was trying to tell us, is that it's all connected, it's interconnected, and I know that for me, obviously we're filmmakers and we're just investigating this amazing story, and with the idea that is it true or isn't it not true, and what we ended up finding was this amazing pattern of evidence that really does match it, and I think that's why people are excited about it. And it's like I said, for you guys, I'm glad you're here, because I like to hear what you think, because it's been hard to communicate to everybody, well, why is this sort of important? We sort of uncovered something, and well, why is it important? So, final words.
I'd say that I kind of feel a responsibility as a Christian to know the truth of what really happened, because if I'm explaining my faith to people who don't necessarily believe in God, it's a huge deal, because like you said, it's a story. So if I don't have somewhere to begin explaining my faith and the history of my faith and how I'm literally tied into all of it, it brings up a lot of questions for me. So I'd like to know the truth of my foundation of everything that I believe. And just another thought that's coming to mind with that is, a lot of times when people are coming to faith, it's because something negative or a large event has happened in their life. So if they can't go to Christ because these things aren't necessarily true, or the foundation of who Christ says that he is isn't there, then what's going to happen in those times?
I agree with everything you just said. It gives our faith some teeth. It gives us the ability to sink into something real. It's not just a story. It's not just something fun to imagine or philosophize about, or spend a really late night talking about. But it actually, if we can talk about real historical events, that gives it, like I said, teeth, weight to it, and gives us a better ground to stand on if we're being questioned.
Yeah, Steve?
Yeah, I think the Bible calls us to have an answer for the faith that we have, and if we don't have any answers, then people are going to say, well, why should I believe that? You can say, well, I believe the Bible because it's in the Bible, but they're just going to say, why should I believe what you believe? And if you don't have any reasons, then that becomes it's an obstacle, it's a stumbling block for them.
Well, that's it for Thinker Updates. Next week we're going to talk about faith and reason. So we're looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.